Thank you. Pleasant morning to one and all. First, let me share my presentation and then start my session. In about 90 minutes from now, I will be sharing whatever little things I know, beginning with scholarly writing and scholarly communication. Since I've got about 90 minutes from the organizers, I will be starting with a basic understanding of scholarly writing and scholarly communication as such. And then I will move on to the ethics in research. I'll be speaking only on one particular aspect of ethics in research and publication, that's plagiarism in research, plagiarism in publishing. So let me share my presentation. Since we have a few members from the Department of Kannada as well, I may switch to Kannada at times in order to make things simple. This will be a bilingual presentation based on the need. So I may switch from Kannada to English and English to Kannada as the situation warrants. You may also even prompt me in case the concept I am explaining seems too technical for you to understand. Then I may switch to Kannada. ಇಂದಿನ ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಮತ್ತು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೈತಿಕತೆಯ ಒಂದು ಆಯಾಮದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಚರ್ಚಿಸಲಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಆ ಆಯಾಮವೆಂದರೆ ಕೃತಿಚೌರ್ಯದ ಆಯಾಮ. ಕೃತಿಚೌರ್ಯ ಎಂದರೇನು, ಅದರ ಬಗೆಗಳೇನು, ಹಾಗೂ ಅದನ್ನು ದೂರವಿಡುವಂತಹ, ಅದನ್ನು ತಡೆಗಟ್ಟುವಂತಹ, ಬಳಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತಹ ಬಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ, ಹಾಗೂ ತಂತ್ರಾಂಶಗಳನ್ನು ಬಳಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ plagiarism detection software, or also known as similarity detection software, how to detect instances of similarity and how to tackle the instances of similarity. But before that, ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಮುನ್ನ ನಾನು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಬರವಣಿಗೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹಾಗೂ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ, ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್, ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಕೆಲವು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ ಹಾಗೂ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ, ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್, ಇವುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ತಿಳಿದುಕೊಳ್ಳದೆ ನೈತಿಕತೆಯ ಒಂದು ಆಯಾಮ, ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೈತಿಕತೆಯ ಒಂದು ಆಯಾಮದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಚರ್ಚಿಸಿದರೆ ಆ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಅಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನನ್ನ ಭಾವನೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ನನ್ನ ಚರ್ಚೆಯನ್ನ ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ವಿಷಯದೊಂದಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. I shall begin the discussion with an understanding of the scholarly writing. So to understand what scholarly writing means, we must compare it with other types of writing, such as writing for scholarly, writing for popular media, such as newspapers and magazines. So I have listed a few characteristics of what it means to be popular literature and what it means to be scholarly literature. ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಮತ್ತು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ, ಇವೆರಡರ ನಡುವೆ ಇರಬಹುದಾದ ಕೆಲವು ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸಗಳನ್ನ ಪಟ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡೋದರ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಅವುಗಳು ಹೇಗೆ ಭಿನ್ನ ಎನ್ನುವುದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮಾಡೋಣ. Firstly, I am talking about writing for newspapers and magazines when I use the term popular literature. And scholarly literature may mean writing for scholarly platforms, scholarly publications, such as books, edited books, journal articles, conference papers, etc. If you look at the availability, the ease of availability of popular literature, ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಲಭ್ಯತೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಸರಳ ಸುಲಭ ಅನ್ನುವುದು ನಿಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಇದೆ. ಇಂದಿನ ದಿನದ ಒಂದು ದಿನಪತ್ರಿಕೆ ಅಥವಾ ಈ ವಾರದ ಒಂದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝೀನ್ ನನಗೆ ಬೇಕು ಅಂದಾಗ ಹತ್ತಿರದಲ್ಲಿರುವ ಒಂದು ಅಂಗಡಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನಾನು ಇತ್ತೀಚಿನ ಸಂಚಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ಅಥವಾ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಒಂದು ಸಂಚಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ನಾನು ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಕೊಂಡುಕೊಳ್ಳಬಹುದು. ಆದರೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ, ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಟ್ರೇಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಕಾಮರ್ಸ್ ಎನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಈ ಜರ್ನಲಿನ ಇತ್ತೀಚಿನ ಸಂಚಿಕೆಯ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತಿಯನ್ನ ತಾವು ಪಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಹಾಗಿದ್ರೆ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಹತ್ತಿರದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಅಂಗಡಿಗೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅದು ಸಿಗುವ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಕಾಶಕರು ಅಥವಾ ಸರಬರಾಜುದಾರರು ಚಂದಾದಾರಿಕೆಯ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಸರಬರಾಜು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. Therefore, scholarly literature is not as easily accessible as popular literature is. That's another difference between popular literature and scholarly literature. The third difference is in the language. The language used by an author in case of a newspaper article or a magazine article will be very simple, avoiding all the technical jargons, even though the concept being discussed in the article is technical. It is for the understanding of common people. Therefore, the language will be very simple and the words used will be very simple. But on the other hand, in scholarly literature, the language used will be very subject specific. Professional terms, technical terms, jargons are very freely used by the author. The author does not worry about the understanding. The author does not have any doubt in the readers of these articles in understanding the words used in the article. Therefore, scholarly writing is for specific audience. There will be specific audience. ನಿರ್ದಿಷ್ಟ ಓದುಗ ವರ್ಗವನ್ನ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆ ಓದುಗ ವರ್ಗದ ಲಕ್ಷಣ ಹೇಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಆ ಓದುಗ ವರ್ಗ ಒಂದು ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ವಿಷಯ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಮೂಲಭೂತ ಜ್ಞಾನ, ಪರಿಣತಿ, ಅನುಭವವನ್ನ ಪಡೆದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ತಾಂತ್ರಿಕ ಪರಿಭಾಷೆಯನ್ನು ಬಳಸಿದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಓದುಗ ವರ್ಗ ಅದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕರಿಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಲೆಂತ್, ಪ್ರಮಾಣ, ಲೇಖನದ ಪ್ರಮಾಣ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಅಥವಾ ಮ್ಯಾಗಝೀನ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಗಳು ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತವಾಗಿ ಇರುತ್ತವೆ. ಆದರೆ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಉದ್ದ ಇರುತ್ತವೆ. ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನ ಬಹಳ ನೀಳವಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ವಿವರಿಸಲಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. So they tend to be longer. The articles in scholarly platforms tend to be longer. As long as the concept is made clear, the length of the article does not matter for the publisher. Review. The most important characteristic, point of difference between popular literature and scholarly literature is in terms of review. ಅವಲೋಕನ ಅಥವಾ ಅದನ್ನ ನೀವು ವಿಮರ್ಶೆ ಅಂತಾನು ಹೇಳಬಹುದು. ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಒಂದು ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಅಥವಾ ಮ್ಯಾಗಝೀನ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿದಾಗ ಅದರ ಸಂಪಾದಕರು ಮೇಲ್ಮಟ್ಟದ ಮತ್ತು ಕ್ಷಿಪ್ರವಾದ ಒಂದು ಅವಲೋಕನ ಅಥವಾ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ ಆ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವೇ ಇಲ್ಲವೇ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಿರ್ಧಾರ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. An editor, in case of popular literature such as newspapers and magazines, takes a quick review or a superficial review of the article in order to decide whether the article or publication in the popular media. On the other hand, what makes scholarly literature distinct from popular literature is the rigorous, in-depth review that takes place in case of every article. Especially journals stand apart in terms of their review. So there is rigorous, in-depth review in case of scholarly literature in general and journals in particular. Another important salient difference is in the way sources are handled and managed. In case of newspapers and magazines, just give me a moment. So in case of popular literature, the author does not give so much importance to the references and the citations to the sources from where the author has borrowed information in order to write the article. On the other hand, in case of scholarly literature, ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಯಾವ ಮೂಲಗಳಿಂದ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಎರವಲು ಪಡೆಯಲಾಗಿದೆ ಅದರ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾದ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮತ್ತು ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಲೇಖಕರು ದಾಖಲಿಸಲೇಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇದು ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಲಿಟರೇಚರಿನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಮುಖವಾದ ಲಕ್ಷಣ. In case of the publisher insists that an author cite every source from where information has been borrowed in order to prepare the article, also give the other bibliographic details so that the readers will understand, will make a distinction between the information that is originally created by the author and the information that has been borrowed by the author from other sources. Therefore, there is evidence-based inclusion of citations and references in scholarly literature. And lastly, popular literature does not intend to give an in-depth understanding of whatsoever concept that is discussed in the article. It aims at giving only surface level understanding of the concept that is discussed in an article. ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇವಲ ಮೇಲ್ಮಟ್ಟದ ಅರಿವು, ಮೇಲ್ಮಟ್ಟದ ತಿಳುವಳಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ಯಾವುದೇ ವಿಷಯ, ತಾಂತ್ರಿಕ ವಿಷಯವಾಗಿರಲಿ, ತಾಂತ್ರಿಕೇತರ ವಿಷಯವಾಗಿರಲಿ, ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮೇಲ್ಮಟ್ಟದ ಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನು ಓದುಗರಿಗೆ ನೀಡುವುದು ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಲೇಖನಗಳ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ವಿರುದ್ಧವಾಗಿ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ವಿಷಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಆಳವಾದ ಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನ, ಆಳವಾದ ಅರಿವನ್ನ ಮೂಡಿಸುವುದು ಲೇಖಕನ ಉದ್ದೇಶವಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಲೇಖಕನ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಹಾಗೂ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯ ಉದ್ದೇಶವಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಈ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಅರಿತುಕೊಂಡಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಜ್ಞಾಪೂರ್ವಕವಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಿದೆಯೋ ಅಥವಾ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಿದೆಯೋ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಸ್ವತಃ ನಾವೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸುವಂತಹ ಸಾಮರ್ಥ್ಯ ನಮಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಎನಿವನ್ ಹೂ ವಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಟು ಎಂಗೇಜ್ ಇನ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ in order to understand these differences, so that one will be in a better position to judge whether one's writing is fit for popular literature or for scholarly literature. So having understood some of the differences between popular literature and scholarly literature, let's now on focus on scholarly literature. That means the language will be subject specific, and there will be rigorous in-depth review involved in the publication of scholarly articles. There will be evidence-based citing and referencing practice, and the author should aim at giving an in-depth understanding, giving insights to the readers. Also to be kept in mind is that the audience, the intended readers, already have basic understanding, prior knowledge of the subject area. So let's go ahead. Here is an example of an article published in the Indian Express. The content of the article, or the topic of the article, is Goods and Services Tax Bill Explained. So this is a basic article explaining goods and services tax. This is one. And let me draw your attention to another article published on more or less the same topic, but in a scholarly journal or scholarly platform. Goods and Services Tax in India, an assessment of the base. So as you may notice by the title, the topic is more or less one and the same, but the way it is presented is different. So that's the difference between a popular article and a scholarly article. Now let's move on to ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್. ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ, ಜನಪ್ರಿಯ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ, ಇದೆರಡರ ನಡುವೆ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡ ನಂತರ, ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ ಸಿದ್ಧಪಡಿಸುವ ಹಂತದಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಗೊಂಡು, ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ಸಿದ್ಧಪಡಿಸುವ ಹಂತದಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಗೊಂಡು ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಮತ್ತು ಬಳಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಯವರೆಗೆ ಆಗುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ನಮಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಆನ್ scholarly communication process. In this example, I will take a journal article. I'll illustrate this common scholarly communication process that gets into the publication and the dissemination of an article in a journal. Generally, scholarly communication process starts with an author submitting a manuscript to a journal. ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸುವುದರಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭವಾಗುವಂಥದ್ದು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ. ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಏನು ತಾಂತ್ರಿಕವಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಏನಲ್ಲ. ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ, ಸಂಪಾದಕ, ವಿಮರ್ಶಕ ಇವರ ನಡುವೆ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರು ಭಾಗಿಯಾಗ್ತಾರೋ ಅವರುಗಳ ನಡುವೆ ನಡೆಯುವ ಸಂವಹನೆಯನ್ನೇ ನಾವು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ ಅಥವಾ ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಇದರ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಕ ಹಂತ ಎಂದರೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಸಿದ್ಧಪಡಿಸಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ, ನಾನೀಗಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದ ಹಾಗೆ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯಾಗಿ ತಗೋತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸುವ ವಿಧಾನ ಹೇಗ್ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಒಂದು ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಅವರು ಮುದ್ರಿತ ಪ್ರತಿಯನ್ನ ಕೊಡಬಹುದು, ಆರ್ an author may send an email to the designated email address, or there may also be these days online submission process of a manuscript. ನಾನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪದವನ್ನ ಬಳಸಿದ್ದೀನಿ. I have used a particular word here. The word is manuscript. The word manuscript generally means something that is written by hand. ಹಸ್ತಪ್ರತಿ, ಕೈ ಬರಹದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಯಾವುದಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. ಹಿಂದಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಖಕರು ತಂತ್ರಜ್ಞಾನ ಮುಂದುವರೆದೇ ಇಲ್ಲದಂತಹ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೈ ಬರಹದಲ್ಲಿ ತಮ್ಮ ಲೇಖನಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಆ ಪದವನ್ನ ಈಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಬಳಸಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಈಗಿನ ಅರ್ಥ ಲೇಖಕರು ಸಿದ್ಧಪಡಿಸಿರುವ ಲೇಖನದ ಆವೃತ್ತಿಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. The author's version of an article is generally referred to as manuscript in scholarly communication. ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಅನ್ನ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ಸಬ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಯುತ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಸಂಪಾದಕರು, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅನೇಕ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಗಳಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಎಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಲಾಗುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕರಡು ಲೇಖನಗಳನ್ನ ಪರಿಶೀಲಿಸುವುದು. One of the responsibilities of an editor of a journal is to screen the manuscript. So screen the manuscript for what? ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾವ ಯಾವ ಅಂಶಗಳ ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ. ಒಂದು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಎರಡು ಕಾರಣಗಳನ್ನ ನಾನಿಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾದಂತಹ ಕಾರಣಗಳು. ಒಂದು, ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿದ ಲೇಖನವು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಕ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲೇ ತಿರಸ್ಕರಿಸೋದು ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾಕೆ ರಿಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದರ ಕಾರಣಗಳನ್ನು ನಾನು ಒಂದೆರಡು ಕಾರಣಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುವಂತಹ ಕಾರಣಗಳು. ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ ಹೇಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಮೊದಲ ಹಂತದ ಪರಿಶೀಲನೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಬರೆದಿರುವ ಲೇಖನದ ವಿಷಯ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಯ ವಿಷಯ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯ ವಿಷಯ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತದೆಯೇ ಇಲ್ಲವೇ. Whether the concept discussed in the article by the author falls within the subject scope of the journal or not. This is the first level screening that is done by an editor. In case the concept discussed in the article is not within the scope of the journal, then in all likelihood, the manuscript may get rejected at the primary level itself. That's number one. Number two, even though the concept discussed in the article is within the scope of the journal for publication, it may not have been formatted according to the submission guidelines of the journal. ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ನ ವಿನ್ಯಾಸಗೊಳಿಸಬೇಕೋ, ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕೋ, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಸಂರಚನೆ ಇರಬೇಕೋ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ರಿಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುವಂತಹ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಪ್ರಮುಖವಾಗಿ ಎರಡು ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಒಂದು, ಯಾವ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನೋ ಅದರ ವಿಷಯ ವ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿಯೊಳಗೆ ನಾನು ಲೇಖನದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಡಕ ಮಾಡಿರುವ ಅಂಶಗಳು ಇವೆಯೋ ಇಲ್ಲವೋ ಒಂದು. ಎರಡನೇದು, ಆ ಜರ್ನಲಿನ ಸಬ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಗೈಡ್ಲೈನ್ಸ್, ಸಲ್ಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಮಾರ್ಗಸೂಚಿಗಳೇನಿದೆ ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಾರವಾಗಿ ನನ್ನ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಸಿದ್ಧಪಡಿಸಿದ್ದೇನೋ ಇಲ್ಲವೋ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನೀವು ಖಚಿತಪಡಿಸಿಕೊಂಡ ನಂತರವೇ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಬ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಮುಂದುವರಿಯೋಣ. ಈ ಹಂತವನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ the editor will send the manuscript to one or more reviewers depending on the editorial policy of the journal. If the editor or the journal has the policy that only one review is sufficient for deciding the status of the article, then one review is done. If there are two reviews required for deciding the status of the article, then two reviewers will be there. Anyway, it will be sent to the reviewer. The job of the reviewer is to study the article, study the manuscript, and make comments on whether any revision or changes are required in the article. If so, in which part of the article changes are required. Secondly, whether this article is fit for publication, a word of recommendation, as to whether the article may be published in the journal or not. So this is the job of the reviewer. The reviewer sends comments to the editor. As you may notice here, there is no direct contact between the author and the reviewer. The editor acts as a bridge between, as a link between the author and the reviewer. In rarest of the rare cases, the editor may give completely positive comment and no revision is needed. Then the article will be, the manuscript will be accepted for publication, and the same will be communicated by the editor to the author. But in most cases, before that, I'll take this one. In case the comments are not positive and there is negative recommendation by the reviewers that the article is not fit for publication, then the manuscript may get rejected after review. In another case, a reviewer may suggest a few changes to be made in the manuscript and may communicate those to the editor. The editor in turn communicates the same to the author and asks the author to revise the manuscript and submit back to the journal within stipulated time. So the author will accordingly revise the manuscript and submit it to the editor. There may be another review. If the editor himself feels that the revisions have been satisfactorily incorporated by the author, editor may take a call at his end whether the article is fit for publication after revision, or if it needs further review, it may be further sent to the reviewer. So the reviewer again sends the comments to the editor. In this stage, If the revision is not satisfactory, then also the manuscript may get rejected. If it is satisfactory, then it is accepted for publication, and the editor will communicate to the author about the decision. So the article gets published. Now, between these two stages, that means ಒಂದು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಒಪ್ಪಿಗೆಯಾಗಿದೆ, ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಮುಂದಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಸಂಚಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಸಂಪುಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಕಟ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಸಂಪಾದಕರು ನಿಮಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಪ್ರಕಟವಾಗುವವರೆಗೆ, ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಒಪ್ಪಿಗೆಯಾಗಿದೆ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿಯವರೆಗೆ ಈ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಅನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪ್ರೀಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. An article that is accepted for publication, that is finalized for publication, but not yet actually published in a journal, is generally referred to as preprint. ಪ್ರೀಪ್ರಿಂಟಿನ ಹಂತದಿಂದ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಹಂತಕ್ಕೆ ಅದು ಬರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಹಾಗಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. ಇದಾದ ನಂತರ ಓದುಗರು, ಆಸಕ್ತರು ಅದನ್ನ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಪಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಈ ರೀತಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹಲವು ವೇದಿಕೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಚಾರವನ್ನ ಹಂಚ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. ಅದರ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಆ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಪ್ರಯೋಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಹೀಗೆ ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್, ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ. ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ವಿದ್ವತ್ಪೂರ್ಣ ಸಂವಹನೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಬೇಕು, ಅತಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನದಲ್ಲಿ, ಅತಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಶ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದೆರಡು ಅಂಶಗಳು. ಒಂದು, there are a few factors to be considered in order to make an article fit for publication in the least possible time with the least possible efforts. Number one, novelty of ideas. ಒಂದು ಸಂಶೋಧನೆಯ ಲೇಖನದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಳಪಡಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಅಂಶಗಳು ಅಥವಾ ನೀವು ನಮೂದಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಅಂಶಗಳು ಅಥವಾ ವಿಷಯ, ಚರ್ಚೆ ಆಗಿರುವಂತಹ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೀನ್ಯತೆ ಇರಬೇಕು, ನಾವೆಲ್ಟಿ ಒಂದು. ಎರಡನೇದು ಕಾಂಟೆಂಪರರಿ ರೆಲೆವೆನ್ಸ್, ಸಮಕಾಲೀನ ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತತೆ ಇರಬೇಕು ಆ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ. ಮೂರನೇದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ್ದು ಒರಿಜಿನಾಲಿಟಿ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅಭಿವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸೃಜನಶೀಲತೆ ಇರಬೇಕು, ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟಿವಿಟಿ ಇರಬೇಕು. ನೀವು ಸ್ವಂತವಾಗಿ ಅಭಿವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಪಡಿಸಿದಂತಹ ವಿಷಯಗಳು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರಬೇಕು. ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಮೂಲಗಳಿಂದ ವಿಷಯಗಳನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳಲಾಗಿದೆಯೋ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೂಕ್ತವಾದ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖವನ್ನ ಪಠ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಮತ್ತು ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ಸೊ wherever information is borrowed from other sources, a clear citation needs to be given within the text of your article and all the other bibliographic details at the end of the article as references. So if you keep in mind all these factors, then I'm very sure with persistent practice, it will be easier for us to write an article, have original expression in the article, maintain contemporary relevance and novelty of ideas, and get the article published. Now, I am going to talk about the review process quickly. ಇನ್ನು 5 ನಿಮಿಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಇಂದಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಗಳು ಪಾಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ. ನಾವೀಗಾಗಲೇ ಹಲವಾರು ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಎನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಹೆಸರನ್ನ ಕೇಳೇ ಇರ್ತೇವೆ. ಸೊ ವಿ ಆಫನ್ ಕಮ್ ಅಕ್ರಾಸ್ ದ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್, and your institution may mandate you to publish your articles only in peer reviewed journals or refereed journals. It's important for us to understand what peer reviewed journal is and what refereed journal is. Peer reviewed journal is a journal which follows peer review process. ನಾನು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದ ಹಾಗೆ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಬಹುಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಹಂತ ಎಂದರೆ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯ ಹಂತ, peer review process, review process. Peer, the word peer generally means one who moves along. Peer ಎಂದರೆ ಬಹಳ ಏನು ಕಷ್ಟಕರವಾದಂಥ ಅರ್ಥ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. ಪಿಯರ್ ಎಂದರೆ ಸಹವರ್ತಿ ಅಂತ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ನಾವು ಕಲೀಗ್ ಎನ್ನುವ ಪದವನ್ನ ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಬಳಸ್ತೀವಿ. ಸಹೋದ್ಯೋಗಿ, ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಉದ್ಯೋಗ ಮಾಡುವವರು ಸಹೋದ್ಯೋಗಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ತಿಸುವವರು, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲೇ ಇರುವವರು ಪಿಯರ್ಸ್. ಆದರೆ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗಳ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಾಗ, ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಸ್, ದ ವರ್ಡ್ ಪಿಯರ್ refers to a person who engages himself in the same subject area as of the author. ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕನ ವಿಷಯ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರ ಏನಿದೆ ಆ ವಿಷಯ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲೇ ಬೋಧನೆ, ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ, ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆ, ಜ್ಞಾನ, ಅನುಭವವನ್ನ ಹೊಂದಿರುವಂಥವರನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪಿಯರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ರೂಪೇಶ್ is from library and information science. His area of study, area of research, area of interest is library and information science. All library and information scientists in the world are peers to Rupesh. For instance, Dr. Ashok Antony D'Souza is from social work, whereas Rupesh is from library and information science. Therefore, they both are not peers when it comes to their area, subject area of engagement. ನಾವಿಬ್ಬರು ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಷಯ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮಾನತೆಯನ್ನು ಹೊಂದಿಲ್ಲದ ಕಾರಣ ನಾವಿಬ್ಬರು ಒಬ್ಬರಿಗೊಬ್ಬರು ಪಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ನಿಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಯಾವುದೇ ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿದರೆ ಅದೇ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಪರಿಣತಿ ಹೊಂದಿರುವ ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ಬ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗೆ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಗಾಗಿ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಸಂಪಾದಕರು ಕಳಿಸಿ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯನ್ನ ಪಡೆದರೆ ಅಂಥ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ, ಒಂದು ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ವರ್ಕಿನ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಅಶೋಕ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ನ ಸಬ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದರೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬರು ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಷನರ್ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಳಿಸಿ ಅವರ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಅದನ್ನ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯನ್ನ ಪಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನು ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. So any journal which follows peer review process is called a peer reviewed journal. In that sense, all modern journals, I can confidently say all modern journals are by their nature peer reviewed journals. There might have been a point of time when one person who is specialized in only one area might have been doing reviews of articles which have concepts in other areas also. So that is called non-peer review. ಆ ರೀತಿಯ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ನನ್ನ ಅರಿವಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದು ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಸು ಅವುಗಳು ಘಂಟಾಘೋಷವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತವೋ ಇಲ್ಲವೋ, ಅವುಗಳು ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತವೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಭಾವನೆ. ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಅನ್ನುವುದು ನಿಮಗೆ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಈಗ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ನು ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್, ವಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಆಫನ್ ಕಮ್ ಅಕ್ರಾಸ್ ದ ಟರ್ಮ್ ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್. ಈ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಂಪಾದಕ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿದಾಗ ಒಂದು ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ರಿವ್ಯೂಗೆ ಕಳಿಸಿ ಅವರಿಂದ ಪಡೆದಂತಹ ಶಿಫಾರಸಿನ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವೋ ಅಲ್ಲವೋ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸಿದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಆಯ್ತು, ಒಂದೇ ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಆಯ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವು ಜರ್ನಲ್ಗಳು 2 ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಮಾಡುತ್ತವೆ. ಒಂದು, ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಕಳಿಸಿ ಅವರಿಂದ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯವನ್ನ ಪಡೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ, ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ದಿ ಒಪಿನಿಯನ್ ಆಫ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ಸ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್. ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಗಳು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೊಂದಿರುತ್ತವೆ. ರೆಫರಿ ಎನ್ನುವ ಒಬ್ಬ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ, ರೆಫರಿ ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಪದ ನಿಮಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಪರಿಚಿತವಾದ್ದು ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಆಟದಲ್ಲಿ, ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಪಂದ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ, ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಕ್ರಿಕೆಟ್ ಪಂದ್ಯವನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂಪೈರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಆನ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಅಂಪೈರ್ಸ್, ಥರ್ಡ್ ಅಂಪೈರ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಇರಬಹುದು. ಅವರಲ್ಲದೆ ಒಬ್ಬರು ರೆಫರಿ ಕೂಡ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ, ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ರೆಫರಿ ಅಂತ. ಈ ಅಂಪೈರಿಗೂ ಮತ್ತು ರೆಫರಿಗೂ ಏನು ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಅಂಪೈರ್ಸು ಒಂದೊಂದು ಬಾಲ್ ಅನ್ನು ಬೌಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗುವಂತಹ ಘಟನೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಿರ್ಧಾರವನ್ನ ತಗೋತಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇಡೀ ಪಂದ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ನಿರ್ಧಾರವನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳುವ ಅಧಿಕಾರ ಇರುವುದು ರೆಫರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ. ಅದನ್ನೇ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ, ರೆಫರಿಂಗ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರು ರೆಫರಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ಸ್ಗಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಜ್ಞಾನ, ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಪರಿಣತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಡೆದಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಂತಹ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯವನ್ನ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಂಪಾದಕರು ರೆಫರಿ ಎನ್ನುವ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗೆ ಕಳಿಸಿ ಅವರಿಂದ ಅಂತಿಮ ತೀರ್ಪನ್ನ ಪಡಿತಾರೆ. ಅಂತಿಮ ತೀರ್ಪುಗಾರರು ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಗೆ ಯೋಗ್ಯವೋ ಅಲ್ಲವೋ ಅಂತ ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸುವುದು ರೆಫರಿ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ರೆಫರಿಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಅಂತ ಯಾವ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೋ ಆ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ 2 ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇರಬೇಕು. ಒಂದು ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಆಯ್ತು ಮೊದಲ ಹಂತ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ರೆಫರಿಯಿಂಗ್. ಇದರಿಂದ ನಮಗೇನು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾದ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ಪ್ರಕಟ ಮಾಡುವುದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ರೆಫರಿಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನು ಪ್ರಕಟ ಮಾಡುವುದು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕಷ್ಟಕರವಾದ್ದು, ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕಠಿಣವಾದ್ದು. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ 2 ಹಂತದ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ದೇರ್ ಫಾರ್ ದಿಸ್ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ರೀಸನ್, refereed journals have higher value than simply peer-reviewed journals in the scholarly world. So, ಇದು ರೆಫರಿಂಗ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಆಯ್ತು, ರೆಫರಿಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಆಯ್ತು. ಇನ್ನು ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಮಾಡುವುದು 2 ಬಗೆಯ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಒಂದು ಓಪನ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ, ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಆಯ್ತು. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂನೇ ಬಹುತೇಕ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತವೆ. ಇವುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಹಳ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಬರುವಂತಹ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್. ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು ಬಗೆ ಇದೆ. ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ನೋಡೋಣ. ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ಒಂದು ನಿಯತಕಾಲಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿದಾಗ ಸಂಪಾದಕರಿಗೆ ಅದು ತಲುಪುತ್ತೆ. ದಿ ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಗೆಟ್ಸ್ ದಿ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿ ಆಥರ್. ಅಟ್ ದ ಟೈಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಂಡಿಂಗ್ ದಿ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ to the reviewer for review, if the editor does not remove any information about the identity of the author from the article, then we can easily understand that the reviewer can know who the author is. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ಕಳಿಸಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಂಪಾದಕ ಲೇಖಕನ ಗುರುತು, ಲೇಖಕ ಯಾರು, ಅವನ ಹೆಸರೇನು, ಅವನ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಏನು, ಅವನ ಇಮೇಲ್ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್ ಏನು, ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಯಾವುದನ್ನೂ ತೆಗೆಯದೆ ಯಥಾವತ್ತಾಗಿ ಹಾಗೆ ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಅನ್ನ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಗೆ ಕಳಿಸಿದಾಗ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಲೇಖಕರು ಯಾರು ಅಂತ. ಆದರೆ ಲೇಖಕನಿಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೂ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರು ಯಾರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಐಡಿಯಾನೇ ಇರಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಲೇಖಕನು ವಿಮರ್ಶಕ ಯಾರು ಅಂತ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕನಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತು ಲೇಖಕ ಯಾರು ಅಂತ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭ. ಈಗ ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಂಪಾದಕ ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಗಾಗಿ ಕಳಿಸಬೇಕಾದ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಲೇಖಕನ ಗುರುತಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಸಿದ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಅಳಿಸಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಆ ಲೇಖನವನ್ನ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಇಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕರಿಗೆ ಲೇಖಕ ಯಾರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಲೇಖಕನಿಗಂತೂ ವಿಮರ್ಶಕ ಯಾರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ನೀದರ್ ದಿ ಆಥರ್ ನಾರ್ ದ ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಟು ನೋ ದಿ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿ ಆಫ್ ಈಚ್ ಅದರ್. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್. ಎಡಿಟರ್ಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಈಗಿನ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ, ಇತ್ತೀಚಿನ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ನ ಬಳಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಇಡೀ ಸ್ಕಾಲರ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಆಗುವುದರಿಂದ ಲೇಖಕನ ಹೆಸರಿನ ಬದಲಾಗಿ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಐಡಿ ಅಥವಾ ಆಥರ್ ಐಡಿ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಡೀ ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ. ಇಂಥ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಡಿಟರ್ಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲ್ಲ ಯಾರು ಆಥರ್ ಅಂತ. ಒಬ್ಬರು ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ಬರ ಗುರುತನ್ನ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಟ್ರಿಪಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಮುಚ್ಚುಮರೆಯ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಯಾಕೆ ಬೇಕು, ಗೌಪ್ಯವಾದಂಥ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಯಾಕೆ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೆಲವರು ಹೊಸ ಬಗೆಯ ರಿವ್ಯೂಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಈಗ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಓಪನ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಖಕನು ಕೂಡ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಬಹುದು, ರಿವ್ಯೂವರ್ಸು ಕೂಡ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಲೇಖನದ ಪ್ರಕಟಣೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಮರ್ಶೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗುವ ವಿಳಂಬ, in order to avoid delay in review process, collaborative review system also has come into picture, in which all the reviewers participate in the review of the article at the same time. So collaborative review. ಇದರ ಕೆಲವು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಾನು ತೋರಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕ್ವಿಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಪ್ಲೇಜಿಯರಿಸಮ್ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ನಂತರ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ. ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ, ಜರ್ನಲಿನ ಪೇಜ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ನಾನು ಮಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಓಪನ್ ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಅಂತ ಇದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಇದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಫುಲ್ಲಿ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಅಂತ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಫುಲ್ಲಿ ಪಿಯರ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂಡ್ ಅಂತ ಇದೆ. ಇದೊಂದು ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಅಂತ ಜರ್ನಲ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ, ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ರೆಫರೀಡ್ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಇದೆ. ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಡಬಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅಂತ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ನೀವು ನೋಡಬಹುದು. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಟ್ರಿಪಲ್ ಬ್ಲೈಂಡ್ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲ್.
Hello, Rupesh sir.
Yes, yes.
Just sorry for interruption, sir. Sir, participants are requesting to speak in English as more number of participants are from across India and abroad.
Oh, certainly. There's a request. Certainly, I'll switch to English. Yeah, in fact, yes. I thank you for prompting. I had requested for such prompting.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go in English from now on.
Yes.
Yeah. So here is another screenshot of a journal which follows open peer review system. Much of the journals publish information about their review policy, editorial policy on their website or in the print issue of their journal. So you may go through the website of the journal to which you intend to publish, to submit an article. Here is another journal which follows collaborative peer review process. Right, now let's move on to a very important issue, the crux of today's session, plagiarism in scholarly writing. The first point of learning about this concept is how to pronounce this word. So let's start our learning on this concept with the most appropriate pronunciation. I don't deny the other pronunciations, but I'm only talking about the most appropriate pronunciation of this word. According to phonetics, phonetically, this word is pronounced plagiarism or plagiarism. Though there are other variants in pronunciation such as plagiarism, plagiarism. I feel the most appropriate pronunciation is phonetic pronunciation, that's plagiarism or plagiarism. So my request is that all of us will consciously make an effort from now on to pronounce this word as plagiarism or plagiarism. Let's move on. Let's understand what this means. To plagiarize means, number one, and most importantly, to steal someone else's ideas, someone else's words, concepts, and pass off, communicate to others as one's own. Secondly, to use someone else's production, someone else's creation, whether it's literary, musical, artistic, or whatsoever, without giving due credit to the source, to the creator. Thirdly, very commonly, to commit literary theft. Take a piece of literature and publish in my name. That's plagiarism. And fourth is to present an existing idea, an existing concept, or even a product as new to an audience, exploiting the innocence of that an already existing idea or product or concept is new. So that's plagiarism, as simple as that. But in academic writing, plagiarism is confined to taking information from other sources and not giving due credit to it, or claiming the authorship, falsely claiming the authorship of some content which has already been created by some other source. So is it serious? Is plagiarism serious? Do we take, should we take it seriously? Yes. Plagiarism is as serious as any other kind of fraud. It is considered academic dishonesty. Plagiarism may not be in itself a crime, an offense, but it may constitute copyright infringement. When it constitutes copyright infringement, it may attract legal action. But now I may have to retract this statement because there have been efforts by UGC to legalize the framework for plagiarism. I'll talk about it a little later. So in academic writing, when an idea or some language, some expression is drawn, used in one's academic writing without adequately crediting the source in the paper, then it constitutes academic writing. A point to be noted is that the source from where idea or language is drawn may be published or unpublished. I must tell you about the difference between plagiarism and copyright infringement at this moment. They may not be one and the same, but the nature or the intention behind both the acts is the same. So plagiarism is mostly false claims of authorship. When a person claims some idea or some concept as his or her own, when it is not, when it already exists, when it belongs to some other person. So the content which has been borrowed but falsely claimed as one's own may or may not be protected by copyright. When the material is protected by copyright, if the holder of the copyright pursues this act legally in the course of law, then it may lead to copyright infringement. In most cases, the instances of copyright infringement arise because the copyright holder sees commercial intent behind unauthorized use of copyrighted material. In most cases, plagiarism leads to, for instance, getting an academic degree. The motive behind plagiarism is getting an academic degree, getting recognition among academic peers. Plagiarism classified into direct plagiarism and indirect plagiarism. Using material from other works also is a type of plagiarism if due credit is not given. So direct plagiarism application also. So it is easier to detect the instances of verbatim plagiarism or direct plagiarism as compared to indirect plagiarism. So how to avoid verbatim plagiarism? One must give credit to the author. If you are using the words as it is, if it is important, inevitable for you to use the words as they are in the original, then take them, place them in the quotation mark, double quotation marks, and give a clear citation next to the borrowed content. So that saves you from the charges of verbatim plagiarism. The second is indirect plagiarism, mosaic plagiarism, also known as. If an author copies bits and pieces not from one source or many sources, changes a few words here and there and changes the order of presentation, then the plagiarism is called mosaic plagiarism or indirect plagiarism. Some people may be under the wrong impression that if I borrow some content and change the words, then the concept, the idea becomes my own. That's a wrong impression, a wrong notion. Even if you change the words, the concept remains the same. The concept is created by someone else. Therefore, even in case of paraphrasing, you must give a clear citation. If you give a clear citation, the reader of your paper will understand that this particular part of content is not created by the author, but has been borrowed from some other source. So you have to make a clear distinction between the ideas you have created originally and the ideas you have borrowed from other sources. If you don't give citation, you are indirectly claiming the authorship of the creation of the content. So a clear citation is the utmost important factor in avoiding the charges of plagiarism. Okay, this I have already mentioned. If you paraphrase a particular concept, you have not used the same words as the original author has used, you have substantially changed it, even then a citation is must. So an uncited paraphrase amounts to indirect plagiarism. Therefore, please make sure that you give a clear citation, even though you substantially paraphrase the concept you have borrowed from some other source. Uncited quotation. You have used something as it is in the original. You have given it in the quotation marks, but you have not given a clear citation. Then this definitely amounts to direct plagiarism. Therefore, if you are borrowing a quotation which is very important for your work, then place the quotation in double quotation marks and next to it, give a clear citation. Using material from others' works and claiming the credit individually. For instance, in a group discussion, which involves many people, as a result of group discussion, a document is prepared and one of the discussants claims the entire credit for the creation of the document, then that also amounts to plagiarism. So these are some of the commonly understood types of plagiarism. At this moment, let me also bring to your notice that people classify plagiarism as accidental plagiarism and deliberate plagiarism. But nowadays, whether the similarity is accidental or intentional, it is considered intentional in the eyes of software. Therefore, I do not give importance to such type of classification of plagiarism as accidental plagiarism and deliberate plagiarism. So let's move on to some of the conventions. Since I am addressing the audience mostly consisting of social scientists, I will cite here American Psychological Association, APA style. There is a convention, general convention, that it's not a rule, it's a convention. If you cross 5 consecutive words, if you borrow more than 5 consecutive words from any source, you must give a clear citation. This is a convention. However, APA style prescribes that if you take direct quotation of 40 words or longer, instead of continuing the quotation along with your other writing, place this in a separate paragraph, separate block, and place double quotation marks. Enclose this block in double quotation marks. You must always begin a quotation on a new line, and you must indent half an inch. For instance, if you are following 1 inch left margin for all other text, this quotation should start from 1.5 inch from left. So half an inch extra margin you must leave for this particular quotation. And at the end of the quotation, a parenthetical citation must be given for the source, even in case of quotations. So that was just a convention. Other styles also will be having similar such prescriptions. So you may go through, according to your need, you may go through the style manual of the concerned style. This is a plagiarism spectrum. What is plagiarism in the eyes of a software? We now have understood what is plagiarism in general, but nowadays most of the institutions are using software for detecting the instances of similarity in academic writing or scholarly writing. Therefore, it is important to understand the types of plagiarism as classified by the Turnitin software. I have given the screenshot and the link is available in the screenshot. Please do visit this link in order to understand the different types of plagiarism. I'm giving it for your convenience here only. So cloning is verbatim plagiarism, copying languages, words as they are, exactly as they are in the original. So Control C is copy paste from different parts, not continuously, from different parts from a single source without altering the original. Find and replace is borrowing content from some other source and changing the words, essentially by finding and replacing it with synonyms. Remixing is taking content from various sources, multiple sources, changing the words, meaning paraphrasing it and fitting them together, tailoring them together. Recycling, in all other earlier cases, an author borrows content from others' works. But in case of recycling, also known as text recycling, the author borrows from his or her own previous work, but does not give a citation. In order to give an impression in the new article that the content which has been borrowed from some other source looks like new in the latest article, in the later article. Hybrid, combining cited sources by copying the passages but not giving the citation in your work. In the borrowed work, there is a clear citation, but the author who copies passages from other cited works does not give citation in his or her article. Mashup is a combination of copied material from multiple sources. There is another 404 error. In this case, the author has borrowed from some source, some material, and he is giving a citation. But the source that is cited there does not exist. Either it is imaginary or it does not exist now. That is 404 error. Aggregator, no original work exists in the entire paper. All the information is only borrowed information, and the author has given clear citation to all the borrowed information. In the entire paper, you may not find even one paragraph having original expression from the author. That is called aggregator. And lastly, retweet, without adequately changing the words, citing it, a proper citation is included. The original text and the borrowed text both are too similar. So there are no efforts from the author to paraphrase the idea or the concept in his or her expression. So these are the different types of plagiarism which can be identified by using the software. So plagiarism detection refers to the process of locating the instances of similarity, I should say, similarity in a work, in a document. It can be either manual or software assisted, but given the fact that today is the era of information explosion, and we have widely scattered billions of documents across the globe on the World Wide Web, and they are easily accessible to authors, it is manually impossible to detect the instances of similarity, even though the text to be checked is very small. So the manual detection is almost impossible. Therefore, software assisted detection has become very common these days. They can detect instances of similarity by comparing the input text with a wide variety of sources. So it is considered more effective, faster, less time consuming than manual detection process. Let me mention a few similarity detection software here. There are software under commercial category, free category, and even open source. Commercial, Turnitin, and Turnitin also provides another service called RightCheck. Turnitin is a leading similarity detection software used across the world by reputed institutions. An equally reputed software is Authenticate. And thirdly, Urkund. Urkund is a plagiarism detection service or software, the access to which is provided by InflipNet to all the UGC recognized universities. There are other software in the commercial category such as Drillbit, PaperRater, Copyscape, Grammarly, PlaqueScan. The efficiency of each software differs. There are a couple of factors which determine the efficiency of similarity detection in a particular software. Number one, the algorithm on which the software has been developed, that is technical. And secondly, more importantly, the corpus of scholarly literature, the whole database of scholarly literature, which is used as the basis for comparing and finding the similarity. Turnitin is considered more effective. Turnitin Authenticate, they are considered more effective because they have access to more scholarly literature to compare than other software. So they enter into agreement with scholarly content publishers, journal publishers particularly, to use their published content in order to check for similarity. So the efficiency greatly varies from software to software. Under free category, Plagiarism CheckerX, desktop plagiarism checker, they can be used. Under open source category, Viper. The software is open source, but the detection service is chargeable. You may have to buy some credits by paying money in order to do similarity checking in Viper. These are software which can be used. No plagiarism detection software works offline. Let me make a note here. It does not work offline. These are all provided under a model called SaaS, SaaS, software as a service. You install the software, or you can also log in on their website and use the service. And the software will be run on their web server. Right. So this is about plagiarism detection software. There are also websites which offer plagiarism detection or similarity detection services. Some of them I have mentioned here: Small SEO Tools, plagiarismsoftware.org, DupliChecker. You can take my presentation from the organizers. I'll share my presentation. You can use any of these. But in my experience and opinion, none of these online plagiarism detection service, free version of online plagiarism detection services, as well as free software, which I mentioned in the earlier slide, are in no way comparable to the commercial software. Therefore, I insist that you get your scholarly work or scholarly document, your thesis, your paper, conference paper, journal article, checked in a commercial plagiarism detection software. Right. So, UGC has made certain efforts with regard to bringing out a legal framework for plagiarism. So on 1st September 2017, a public notice was released by UGC along with a draft regulation inviting opinion on the changes to be made on the feedback for the regulation. And after inviting all the public opinion, UGC notified a regulation on 23rd July 2018. And this regulation is called UGC, Promotion of Academic Integrity and Prevention of Plagiarism in Higher Educational Institutions, Regulations 2018. According to these regulations have already been notified. All the UGC funded universities have to invariably follow these regulations. It's just a matter of time that every university will embrace these regulations and implement in their respective universities. So these regulations contain levels of plagiarism. According to these regulations, level 0 plagiarism means up to 10% similarity, which is considered a minor similarity. There is no penalty for minor similarity. Similarity between 10%, above 10% and 40% is level 1. 40%, above 40% up to 60% is level 2. And the highest is similarity above 60%, which is considered level 3 in these regulations. So according to these levels, the disciplinary action or the penal action will be decided. Let's come to the penalties in case of theses and dissertations. In case similarity is found up to 10%, there is no penalty. If a thesis contains similarity above 10% up to 40%, in that case, the research scholar will be asked, or the student will be asked to submit the revised script within a stipulated time, not exceeding 6 months. So up to 6 months, it will be withheld. And 40 to 60%, above 40 up to 60%, the student or the research scholar will be debarred from submitting the revised script for a period of 1 year. So a student may lose valuable 1 year in case up to 60%, above 40 up to 60% similarity is found. Level 3 is similarities above 60%. This, of course, the registration for the program, MPhil or PhD or any other program will be cancelled. For repeated plagiarism, there is higher level of penalty in every type of document. When it comes to academic and research publications for faculty members and research scholars, particularly the research articles, no penalty up to 10%, 10% to 40% if the manuscript has already been submitted, the author will be asked to withdraw the manuscript. 40% to 60% withdrawing the manuscript, 1 annual increment will be denied. And if the faculty member is a supervisor for master's, MPhil or PhD, there will be 2 years ban on it. Similarities above 60%, withdraw manuscript, 2 annual increments will be denied and 3 years ban on research supervision. Right. So, however, there are certain exclusions. Similarity checks exclude all quotations which are produced with necessary permission and or attribution. Attribution refers to citation here. References, bibliography, table of contents, preface and acknowledgement will not be considered for similarity checking. All general terms, laws, equations, symbols are exempted from similarity checking. Also, if a particular text does not belong to any of these, it's not a quotation, it is not a preliminary material like reference or bibliography or preface acknowledgement, it is not a generic term, not a law, standard symbol, not standard equation, even then, any content which is considered general knowledge or common knowledge is exempted up to 14 consecutive words. For instance, I need not give any citation for using a statement in my work. Mahatma Gandhi is considered the father of the nation in India. It forms part of common knowledge. Therefore, it does not need citation. Even if similarity is found by the software, then it will be exempted. It will not be considered as plagiarism. So there are certain exclusions in these regulations. Tumkur University has notified the regulations or the rules for checking of plagiarism exactly as given in UGC regulations, which I cited earlier. So 10%, 10 to 40, above 10 to 40, above 40, 60, 60, above 60, all these are notified. I'm sure most of the universities have already initiated this. Okay. According to these regulations, another part of these regulations is that every institution must give individual access to plagiarism detection software. When I say every institution that is funded by the UGC, every university that is funded by the UGC must give individual access to the faculty members in order to check their work for similarity on their own instead of depending on somebody else. Accordingly, my university has given me an individual account. So whenever I prepare an article to be submitted to a journal or a conference proceeding or my students' dissertations, I make sure that before I submit it, I check it in Urkund. That is available to us. So Urkund similarity detection software is used by me to check for similarity. Wherever I find similarity, I make sure I adequately paraphrase those portions and give a clear citation. So how to desist from plagiarism, from the charges of plagiarism? Certain points, certain strategies I'll mention here. Number one, understanding citing and referencing standards, how to cite, how to give a reference. Understand the internationally accepted citation styles. I will mention a few in my subsequent slides. Use quotations. Even when you use quotations, cite the source. If you borrow any content or idea from the source, and even if you adequately paraphrase, please make sure you include a clear citation. And whenever you prepare a scholarly work, make it a habit to check it for similarity by using one or more software. And most importantly, practice writing, practice creative expression in your writing. So that's important. If you persevere, then it is not hard to come out with a document which will have very minor similarity in the very first attempt. So it's all about putting persistent efforts. So that's about plagiarism. And Dr. Gopakumar, of course, in the afternoon session will be practically demonstrating one of the software which you can use for managing the references. But I want to give you a quick understanding of some of the words, some of the terms that we often come across in scholarly writing. Without having an understanding of these terms, I feel scholarly writing will be incomplete. Citation, references, bibliography, further reading, these are some of the terms that we commonly come across in scholarly writing. A citation is a specific source from which some content has been borrowed, and that source is mentioned in the text of your paper, in the body of your paper. So remember, citations always appear inside the text of your paper. When I say paper, I mean broadly all types of scholarly documents, including theses and dissertations. The second is references. Whatever sources you cite in the body of your paper, all the bibliographic details of those sources have to be listed at the end of your paper under the heading references. Depending on the citation style, referencing style you follow, the name may differ. For instance, APA style uses the word references. MLA style may use the phrase works cited, but both mean the same. So in case you have 10 citations in the body of your paper, the bibliographic details of all the 10 citations have to be listed at the end of your paper under the heading references. So that's about references. Bibliography is a list of sources which an author has consulted, has been benefited by consulting it, but has not borrowed any idea or concept or content from those sources. All those sources have to be listed under the heading bibliography. Now, you may understand that both are not one and the same. References and bibliography are not one and the same. They are different. References include those sources, only those sources which have been cited in the text of the paper. But bibliography includes those sources which have been consulted by the author, but no idea or concept or content has been borrowed. But because the author has been indirectly benefited by consulting those sources, it becomes the ethical responsibility of the author to list these sources, to express gratitude. So all these sources will be listed under a separate heading called bibliography. Apart from references and bibliography, an author may feel that the readers may consult some other sources if the readers have to get additional information about the concept that is discussed. Every work, every publication will have certain scope, will have certain limitations. Beyond the scope of the article, if any reader wants to have additional knowledge, then the author may give clue about the sources which can be consulted by the readers in order to get additional information. All these sources are not critical for understanding the research problem that is discussed in this particular article, but may be referred by the readers in order to get additional information to enhance their knowledge. So all those sources will be listed under further reading. But how do I decide whether a particular source should go to references or bibliography or further readings? Let's look at it with the help of a flowchart. Take a particular source. If you have borrowed any content or concept or idea, in that case, cite it in the appropriate location in the body of your paper and add the bibliographic details to references. Okay. If you have not borrowed the content, but you have been benefited by consulting some source, in that case, add that particular source to a list called bibliography. Thirdly, you have neither cited nor have you consulted, but if you want readers to consult some sources for their enhanced, for their extended reading and enhancement of knowledge, then add those sources to further reading. So this is how you can decide where a particular source should go. Okay, let me give you example of citations. What you see here, what I have marked in red colored rectangles are citations. The style that is followed in this article is APA style, American Psychological Association style. You may notice that the citations are given inside the text of the paper in parentheses, in brackets. So APA follows parenthetical citation, generally author date style. Author date style. Sometimes page number, author date page number style. You can see author's name here, Lancaster and Stillman, and you can also see the date meaning the year of publication of the source. And here I see another citation, Roberts 2000, but you notice a change here. The author's name is not in the brackets, it is outside the brackets. It is very much a part and parcel of the statement. Roberts 2000, only the date is inside the brackets. Roberts 2000 defined mentoring as XYZ. In this case, if I remove the name of the author, then the sentence becomes incomplete. Therefore, citations can be given at the end of the borrowed content in brackets. That is called parenthetical citation. Citation can also be part of the statement that is made by an author. Such a statement, such citation is called a narrative citation, also known as a signal phrase. Okay, right. So you earlier probably you have seen two citations, Love et al. And NG et al. The words et al. Are used when there are more than two authors, three or more authors in a particular source according to APA style. Et al. Stands for and others. So it means Love and others, and NG and others. There are other authors. Okay, so this is about in-text citations. You see the list of references. In APA style, the entries in references are arranged in the alphabetical order of the author's name. So you see alphabetical listing. When it comes to arrangement, there is absolutely no difference in arranging the entries in references, bibliography, and further reading. It is alphabetical by name of the author. This is a bibliography, and this is further reading. Okay, so there are certain internationally accepted and practiced referencing styles. I have listed a few here. And there are specific subject areas in which these styles are commonly used. Let me go to the next slide in order to get some more details about the styles. American Psychological Association is generally used in social sciences broadly, in psychology education in particular. Then MLA style, Modern Language Association, is used in languages, humanities, liberal arts. And in the rightmost column, I have also given how citations are given and how references are given. Vancouver is popular in sciences, particularly biomedicine, engineering. Oxford is for Oxford University internal use, adopted by many other institutions also. Harvard is for sciences and social sciences. Or Turabian is popular in history, literature, arts. Then the IEEE style is for engineering. MHRA, a relatively new style, MHRA is popular in humanities, English language, literature. Right. So I request all of you to consciously engage in citing and referencing, because it's an ethical practice. It is the ethical responsibility of the author to cite each and every source. It also constitutes good research or writing culture. Citing and referencing help in creating impact for others' research, also getting impact for your research. It also facilitates measuring and comparative analysis of research impact of authors. Therefore, with a request that all of you engage in a practice called cite while you write. Whenever you are writing an article, at the time of writing itself, whenever you borrow some content, immediately insert a citation. How is it possible if I don't know the style? It is possible by using a software which you will understand in the afternoon session. So with this, I'll conclude my presentation. I'll go to demonstration session. I'll take a sample article and I'll try to run a similarity checking and get a report and check the different sources where similarity has been found, and paraphrasing can be done, citation can be given. So I'll just give a list of reference management software which can be used. Then I will conclude this presentation. So Microsoft Word has inbuilt citations and bibliography manager. Then there are other full-fledged software, both free and commercial. The last two, RefWorks and EndNote, are commercial, whereas Zotero, Mendeley, and JabRef are free. So you can use free reference management software to easily manage references in your scholarly writing and academic writing. Right. So with that, let me end this presentation. Now let me go to the demonstration. Okay, I'll quickly demonstrate in about 5 minutes. I'll quickly demonstrate how to input a document into a plagiarism detection software and take a similarity report, download the similarity report, or also known as originality report, and identify the sources. Paraphrase. Okay, paraphrasing, of course, cannot be shown in one session like this. Unless you understand the concept, it's difficult to paraphrase. So substantially change the wordings, do paraphrasing, and repeat the similarity checking in order to get lesser rate of similarity. So let me stop sharing this presentation and let me go to the most important part of using a similarity detection software. I will show an article which I will be uploading. So when you are inputting a document to a similarity detection software, I suggest that you remove all author related information, because if the author related information is already existing in some source online, then that may also be shown as similarity. Some institutions also have a practice of excluding or deleting the abstract before inputting it to similarity detection software. Okay, so let me use this article, and here I have logged in to Turnitin software. Now here I have got an option to submit file. As you may notice, I have already checked 2 documents a couple of days ago, and it is showing the similarity here. Okay, 13%. It is the same paper. The first time when I checked the paper, it was showing 21% similarity. I will show you the similarity report later. Then I tried paraphrasing it, and it is showing 13% similarity. The journal to which I have to submit this imposes a threshold limit, maximum limit of 20% similarity. Therefore, now after checking it for the second time, because it is showing 13% similarity, I can now submit this manuscript to the journal. Okay, so I click on submit file. Okay, so let me give sample paper. Okay, sample paper for, okay, some name I have given. You may notice that I have made a setting here. The file you are submitting will not be added to any repository. Generally, there is an option in every plagiarism detection software that whatever you input, whatever document you input once, will get added to standard repository as a source. The next time you input the same document with minor revisions, it may sometimes show 100% similarity. So I have made a setting here. If you have instructor account is a type of account in Turnitin, which has the option to decide whether the papers which you are inputting, the article which you are inputting, should be added to repository or not. So since I have to repeat the plagiarism checking after revision, I will not be adding this to repository. In Turnitin software, there is a basic level account called student account. If you have student account, you will not have this option to decide whether the paper has to be excluded from the repository. It will be compulsorily added to the repository. Okay, that's a software feature. We cannot help it. So I will choose the paper from the computer. I choose it from this computer. Okay, this is article is the one. I'll open it. Okay, I will upload this to the repository, the software. It will show me a preview and it will ask for my confirmation. Documents can be uploaded in doc format or PDF format also. So it shows the submission title, file name, file size, how many pages, how many words, how many characters. This is the file. I'll confirm it. Okay, so if I want, I can submit another file, or I can go to assignment inbox. And I have got here the one which I have submitted. So it takes some time for the software to check for similarity and give you the rate of similarity. So you may have to wait for some time to get the similarity. So after you get the similarity, you can view the similarity report, find out the instances of similarity, paraphrase the instances of similarity and give citation, run the similarity test again. So I'll just refresh it to find out whether I will get the similarity. Okay. Now, you notice that this sample paper is showing 19% similarity. Okay, so if I click on the percentage of similarity, a new tab opens and it will give me the similarity report. You can view the similarity report online, or you can download the similarity report and read the similarity report leisurely. Let the report load, and then I will show you how it shows the sources. Okay, right. You're seeing that Turnitin is showing here the number and different colors for each instance of similarity, and if I scroll to the bottom, let me take you to the end of this report. Here it is not showing. Let me download the similarity report. Then I will show you the downloaded one. Here I have got the option to download, and I will download the current view. It is giving me the download option. Let me download and open it on my computer. Let me save the file on the desktop.
Excuse me, Rupesh sir.
Yes.
In due course of that downloading, can we get some questions so that it can be, you can answer those questions?
Certainly, it is already downloaded.
Yeah.
Let me just show you. Probably after seeing this report, we can take up a few questions.
Sure, sir.
Because after seeing the report, a few participants may also have questions on the report itself. Okay. So let's include those questions also. Yeah. Right. So this is the report which I have downloaded. I hope it's visible to you.
It's visible, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So let me scroll down to the end of it. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So this is the originality report. Similarity index is 19%. The overall similarity in this paper is 19%. Turnitin follows its own classification of sources. 14% of the sources are internet sources. 11% are publications, and another 11% are student papers. This is purely Turnitin classification. Even I do not know the criteria on the basis of which a source is classified as internet source or publication or student paper. Let's anyway go to the first source. You see that every source is uniquely marked with a color, and it is showing a particular source. Okay, so these sources, if you go to the text, for instance, let me zoom it in. So this is source number 13. Okay, in the field of library and information science, this is a particular part which has been found as similar. But the most important part, let me tell you, the person who is authorized to decide whether a particular instance of similarity is plagiarism or not plays a crucial role in the field of library and information science. Now, Turnitin has recognized this. I detected this as something similar to the content that is available in some other source, and the source number is also given. But is this really plagiarized content? No, this is not plagiarized content. Even though it is showing similarity, this is a very general part of the sentence in the field of library and information science. This is not something unique. This is not something original. Therefore, whether a particular instance of similarity is plagiarism or not, this has to be ultimately decided out of human wisdom by the person who is authorized to do so. So it is very important. It is very important that due training is given to people in the universities who are authorized to decide whether a particular instance of similarity is plagiarism or not. So this is in fact what I wanted to show. A software goes purely by matching the text. Okay, so every text, every piece of text that is found similar to text in some other source may not be plagiarism, need not be. necessarily plagiarism. Therefore, it is important for people at the helm of affairs to understand what really plagiarism is, and to consciously realize that every instance of similarity need not be plagiarism. So we should not blindly go by what the software says. So this particular source has to be excluded from the charges of plagiarism. Okay, right. So most of the things you see here, most of the things that Turnitin has found out in this particular paper is very general expression. It is not unique expression. It is not unique to one particular source. So if that is the case, most of the instances can be ruled out from the charges of plagiarism. However, wherever possible, it is the responsibility of the author to paraphrase it and give citation. If it is not common knowledge, if it is not general knowledge, an author must paraphrase adequately and give citations. So citations are given, references are given. Okay, so this is about the originality report, how to generate originality report. So what I do is, I often run similarity check for every document that I prepare. Wherever similarity is found, I try to paraphrase. In the course of paraphrasing, my vocabulary also improves. It's a test of my vocabulary. My creative expression ability also gets sharpened. So plagiarism detection has certain indirect benefits in improving your writing also. So that's about how to check it for the similarity. Get it checked using any software. Access it. You can send the paper to them and get it checked. For the purpose of demonstration, I got this access from somebody else. So that's about the demonstration. This is as simple as that. Just uploading the document, it will run the similarity check, gives you the similarity index. You can download it, leisurely read it, and carefully paraphrase and give adequate, give clear citations in your paper, and rerun the similarity checking. So that's about a practical demo of similarity checking. Thanks to the audience. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for this opportunity.